Welcome to this week's episode of Roadmap. I'm your host, Rach, and in today's episode, we have Michael Palmer from the BBC joining us as a special guest. And today we're going to talk about Product for Good, what it is, the work that Michael's been doing within the community that is set up, Product for Good. We're going to be delving into more details on that throughout this episode. So welcome, Michael.
I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Nice. So just to, I guess, set the conversation, what is it that you do? What is it? Who are you?
Who am I? Good question. I am Michael Palmer. I am a senior product manager at the BBC. I've been at the BBC for coming up to 3 years now, I think, maybe 2.5. And my role, I've only recently stepped into a new role as the product person across dynamic homepage within iPlayer. So really exciting new role, great challenge, and I'm sure we'll delve into what those collection of words mean in a little bit.
Brilliant. So Product for Good, What is it?
Yeah, so Product for Good is a community that has brought together some like-minded set of product folk, at the minute mainly in the public sector, who want to make sure that the products that they're creating are, as the name suggests, doing things that are beneficial for society, or at least if there's things about their product that could potentially cause harm, they're trying to mitigate for that. It's been a bit of a journey. It's still a work in progress, but it's been growing, and yeah, it's been a really exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah. So when we were chatting about planning the episode, you mentioned the Facebook story, and this is how the idea came around. So I wondered if you could elaborate on that, because it's such an interesting thing, and I never think about it. But in the age of social media, that story really stuck with me.
Yeah, 100%. And this is a story from, I think it was 2001, when there was the case that was quite infamous at the time, the Facebook whistleblower, where a Facebook employee came out and was speaking to the press, saying that from internal meetings she was in, from what she was saying, there's no denial that Facebook at that time knew that its algorithms were spreading misinformation, were creating online hate, and also having a negative effect on teenage mental health. However, those same algorithms that were doing all those things were also very profitable. Yeah. So the company made a decision to carry on doing those things because money was the bottom line. And she had a moment when she decided, I can no longer be a part of this. And that's when she came forward. It's quite interesting and timely, news in recent weeks about Facebook's turn of direction, and they're now getting rid of the fact checkers, and, free speech reigns. Be interesting to see how that plays out. But I just remember around the time that I was reading an article that was referencing back to that Facebook whistleblower story. And around the same time, I went to a workshop for product managers to think about sustainability and what they should be thinking about in relation to their products and protecting the world's finite resources. And I found that workshop so inspiring. I realised that as a product person, we're really lucky with the agency our role affords, from the beginning of the product life cycle right the way through to the end. I hate that phrase, CEO of the product kind of thing, but
yeah, it does ring true though, doesn't it? In some cases, it's the only person that can make this decision is me. So it's quite a lot of weight to have.
Definitely. Yeah. And I would never, I'm not the CEO of any product that I've been a part of. I'm sure many product managers don't feel that they are, but you are making decisions in light of someone else being there. And it got me realizing that we decide what we prioritize. We decide what things we don't do. And I just thought, I wonder if there's a way that we can, as product people, upskill ourselves to make sure that the decisions we're making are trying to either prevent harm or at least mitigate it where it's not possible to prevent harm, or even better, do some good.
Yeah. Brilliant. I think it's such an interesting topic because every decision we make every day, and you see it in when you're consciously doing it as well. So, like dark patterns, that gets talked about quite a lot. The hooked model. So I was talking to someone about it earlier, like in a meeting. I was like, have you ever seen the Netflix show, The Social Dilemma? And it links to the story about Facebook. And all these engineers were coming out on this Netflix documentary. They were just like, I really regret the decision of building that now, because people are addicted to, like I was even saying, look, people are so addicted to social media. And what do you do on an evening? You're on TikTok, you're mindlessly scrolling. You say you're going to read a book. It doesn't happen because you're addicted. And they create, like, even Duolingo gamification. Like there's always a point and a thing that they want to capture users with. And rightly or wrongly, it's like, what are the consequences of that? So it's fascinating.
And that's for us, people who are adults, and we are struggling with putting down our phones.
Yeah.
But if you are a young person and you've grown up and that is in many ways all you know, and your mind is forming at the same time as being addicted to social media or your phone, we don't know yet the long-term effects that that'll have, but I'm willing to take a bet that it's not going to be great.
No. Yeah, you're in your own. Like, I do think about the fact that, like, even cyberbullying, that's a huge thing these days. That if, you and me in our school days where we didn't have easy access to phones, to social media, it just sticks with you. So even after you've gone home after school, you have to deal with that kind of behaviour online. So yeah,
I remember
can't escape it.
Yeah, I find when my niece was younger, watching her on Instagram, she would be asking people in the family to like her photos.
Yeah.
And when I was asking her, like, oh, why? Like, why do you care?
Yeah.
It was basically because it's a big thing in school the next day. Like, if not enough people.
I've got 20 likes.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you just think, oh, that's a lot of pressure to have to deal with at a tender age and to navigate.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm really glad that, well, I didn't grow up in that, but I've got 2 daughters who will have to grow up in that environment. So it's,
and what's going to be that big thing when, like, your children are older? Like, are we going to turn into Black Mirror, where who knows what's going to happen in 20 years? I mean, it feels like society is definitely evolving, whether it's in a good or a bad way at the minute. But yeah, there's lots of, I feel like technology, like even AI, which we'll go on to later in the episode, that's constantly evolving. So it's, I think, a big challenge that we've got as product people is sometimes we don't know what those consequences are going to be. So AI, for instance, is evolving at the minute. We're trying to identify, like, what that use case is in society. And it's almost like you've got to think ahead of it.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way in product for good, where it's just like you've got to think ahead of the curve before it happens? Like, how can you preempt some of these problems that might come up?
That's precisely the kind of thing that we're looking to do this year. It is to sort of role play these things and play the tape forward and imagine what might happen if we don't think about things now. So at least by doing that, and what we're aiming to do is come up with frameworks that teams can use to do this as part of a discovery phase or an alpha phase. So before you start building anything, have you done due diligence in thinking about some of those consequences that might come up if you're not trying to, as you said, like, second guess the future? But I also want to say that, like, obviously what we're talking about so far has been negative, but I work in product because I love technology and I'm an optimist, and I genuinely believe that technology and innovation can make lives so much easier. Like, if you look at, Microsoft get quite a hard time, but under Satya Nadella, they've really focused on empathy. And as a result of that, a lot of the work they've done has been in the accessibility space. And they've done some amazing things with AI and helping people who are visually impaired to, navigate the world with technology. So, like, there's great things going on. But also, if we aren't thinking like you said, and trying to think, okay, AI's here, what are the good things that can happen, but also what are the potentially negative pitfalls? It's just about trying to be a bit more aware. Yeah,
it definitely resonates with me as well, because I work on a regulated product, so I can't just make product decisions without a governance meeting. So consumer finance is a huge thing. There's obviously a lot of noise in the media at the minute around commission scandals, and we, like, as a business, we've always had this approach that we try to be as transparent as possible. So as this is evolving and we're getting new guidelines, like, we're always thinking about those consumer outcomes and just in general, like consumer duty. So I think there's a lot of, you know, like you said, to your point, where it's like, look, we are in these we're on these roles, we work in product because we want to make a positive impact. And I think there's quite a lot of power in that as well. So I think it's just making the space to think about it that really makes a difference.
100%. And that's like a big thing that, as I mentioned before, I do think there's so much agency in the role, more than a lot of other roles. So are you using that sort of power and responsibility that comes with it, and thinking about these things? I'm really interested though, like what's it been like being in the space that you're in whilst this has been in the media?
See, I really enjoy it. I don't enjoy like the fact that it's had to get to a high court ruling to find out that consumers somewhere have been impacted by this experience. But it really does make you think. So one of the things that we are doing at the minute, just in general in consumer finance, is actually just questioning the content and information that we give to consumers. Like, and I've always been like a consumer focused product manager. Like, I've loved it, and I have worked at companies in the past where, you know, they do make that decision at a business level where they're like, oh yeah, well, it might negatively impact them, but it don't matter. Like, we want to get this conversion or we want to get this growth, and that's our goal out of it. And the beauty I have in consumer finance is there's less pressure to do that, because you want to make sure that that consumer's made the right choice. And yeah, it's great. Like, I've always just wanted to make a difference for them and just make sure, like, just letting them know they've got options. And I think a power of that and an outcome for a business is the more transparent you can be with them, like with consumers, with users, the more likely they are going to use your service versus, you know, we've all been on a website and you're like, I don't feel like I've been informed at all. I don't feel like I've had a good experience. Feels like they don't care. And I think if a company puts care into something, like there's real strength in that. There's real growth, and it's a byproduct of like what you might already be doing. So I really enjoy it.
And I think that's a point that I try and make with it. It's not just for like a warm fuzzy feeling inside about like, oh, we're doing good. Don't get me wrong, that is nice. But in the case that you just explained, there's often a tangible or a result for like greater profits in the future, because if you do demonstrate trust, you'll retain or grow your market share. But I'm interested, like, knowing what you know now, would you do anything different in future experiences? Have you learned anything from it?
I think it's really made me think about like what a consumer sees. So I look after quite a big chunk of, because like finance is not just a small bit of a journey. Like, it's an entire buying experience, and it does make me question. I'm like, okay, this is a consumer lens. This is what they'll see when they see this. This might be what's going through their head when they hit this page. Does this language make sense? So it does make you question, and it's we use the term here. I don't know if you have used it, but dog fooding.
Yeah.
I find it really funny. Like, it makes me laugh every time, and I love seeing people's reactions to it. You know, when you chat to someone who's never experienced it before or heard about it, they're like, "What? You're doing what in a room?" I'm like, "Dog fooding." We actually did an exercise the other week, and this was like the wider buying journey. So it's not just finance; it's like a vertical into reserving a car and all that great stuff. And we just did this simple exercise of, let's print some pages out and screenshots from the journey. You got a red pen, you got a green pen. What's the red? Like, what's the negative part of it? What's the good side? How do you grow out that green side? And it does make you think. And it's also just getting people in the business that have never experienced it before. So if you don't work in that domain, let's get people in a room. And it's just something as simple as that. It really does make you question like what are users seeing? But I really enjoy that side of products. I don't know about yourself, but it's great to see things that users see. There's always something where you can change things for the good.
100%. It sounds like the work you're doing there is exactly the kind of thing in Product for Good we want to encourage product people within their teams to do, but also upskill them in how to do it as well.
Yeah. Because it's not always clear as well. So when you ask me, oh, what would you do differently? I kind of know in my head, but is there a practice there to doing it? And you mentioned, you know, you're looking at frameworks and just better processes. How's that going? Have you got to like a good space with that, or is that evolving? What are you learning from putting those sorts of frameworks together?
So we haven't yet. This is the thing. Basically, we started in October 2024, and we've been meeting roughly once a month.
Yeah.
So the first couple of sessions were kind of just like bringing people together and a chat about why have you joined this, what do you want to get out of it.
Yeah.
Everyone who had joined it had filled out a form, and one of the things that really struck me was like, you know what it's like when you get an online form, like everyone's busy and you're thinking, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
But people had written like in quite a lot of detail about why they felt passionate about the idea of being involved, what sort of topics were dear to them, and kind of some of the stuff that we've been speaking about, people saying, you know, I've got young children and I'm thinking about their future, or I'm really passionate about the climate and I'm worried about the effect of AI or just the increasing use of electricity or carbon. So people weren't just joining it because they thought it was something, oh, why not? They felt driven to it because they were passionate about it. And in the first couple of sessions, or the first session at least, we just kind of like read out some of the reasons why people said they were wanting to join. And I think one of the first things that stood out to me was like, he's like a really good group of people just to know. Like there's a bunch of good eggs here, and I knew like maybe 2 or 3 of the people who had joined, but most of them just people from LinkedIn at that point. So that's one thing, just like knowing a great group of people to learn from. But then we started talking about, on the form we'd said topics that were of interest to us, and there was a lot of overlap. So we basically did some classic product 2x2 grid, kind of like, here's all the things people have said are important, which do we actually want to progress with. And the ones that came out on top were creating a set of tech ethics. Then underneath that was how to think more about sustainability in the products that we are product managing. And then the last one was kind of to the point that you were making about how do you protect the individual who's using the product. There were loads of like other things, but they tended to get the most votes, and also we felt we could produce more value on those. So we basically were starting with the tech ethics, and we've been really, really fortunate. Someone in our midst is a sociologist who has studied tech ethics for the past like 10 years, and she's like an expert on sociology but also an expert on tech, so it's like a perfect overlap. And she's kind of just like led us through the first 6 months, and one of the exercises that we've been doing is we've been looking at she's set as a task to think about all the unintended consequences that our products could have. So, for example, things that were coming out were things like data privacy, and if there was a breach, what could happen, or sustainability, or if you're in the process of automation, like job losses, just all these things that, like, when you actually the task was really interesting to sit and, as we were saying before, like imagining the future, not just bad things, also like good things that an unintended consequence. And then we've sat down and looked at all the unintended consequences that people have done and seeing where there was overlaps. And we found there's about 6 where we're thinking, okay, we're in like really vastly different sectors here, but we found there's these consequences that we're all aware of. So are there frameworks or principles or a set of ethics that we are now looking in 2025 to create frameworks to help people to identify these issues, and then if they spot them in their product, what they can do with their teams to try and mitigate the harm. So I wouldn't say the frameworks have been created. At this point, it's just been building to the point where
just get everybody's thoughts together and like how that's going to evolve.
But based on one of the things I've loved about the group is everyone's super pragmatic. It's not a talking shop. People like, we want to do stuff. We want to, it's like action driven. So I am really excited to see what this great group of people can do in the next 12 months.
Yeah. And what, because you mentioned like there's people from various different sectors. So what sort of industries?
Yeah. As I said, at the minute, the bias is mainly in public sector. So people in government, some people in charity sector, some people in university, there's some in media. I think it would be good for the group to counterbalance that over time, and I'm hoping that more people from the private sector will join. I think maybe that bias towards public sector might come from the fact that I'm the one who's been trying to hire people. And
Yeah,
my background in
maybe.
product has been in public sector,
Yeah.
so it's just like that's my
And
network.
you're always going to look at it through that lens as well. Like if you do work for a public sector, I guess you're thinking about it more than maybe someone who's in a private sector, and maybe that's not their day to day. They don't have to worry about it as much. But I guess the purpose of this is it should matter to everyone, and it's how you make it matter to them all. Yeah.
Yeah, and give them the tools to think about
Yeah.
how they can affect change. Because as we were saying before, it's not about like, oh, this is a nice thing to do. A lot of the time by doing these things, you'll affect the bottom line as well.
Yeah.
Like going back to Microsoft, under that embrace of empathy, they increased their profits 7-fold since they made that decision. And they've now become like, they've been $1 trillion company for a long time. So there is a profit motive as well for thinking this way.
Yeah. What have you, so I guess what are the learnings so far? What's been the good, the bad, the in-between? Like how, as someone who is organising and facilitating this, what are you learning from that lens? Like, have you had any challenges or?
Yeah, I think this is the first time I've done something like this, and also it was never like a plan of mine to do this. It kind of just happened because after I was thinking about that Facebook post, as I mentioned, and the sustainability workshop, I just put something on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Kind of like, would anyone be interested in a group that talked about these kind of things without a clear plan of where it was going? And that post got quite a lot of responses. So then I thought, oh, maybe I should do something, but I don't know. And then I wrote a blog article kind of exploring the space a bit more with a sign up form. And quite quickly, like about 40 people signed up. So I just thought, maybe there's legs in this then. So it's kind of just like organically grown. And every time we have a meeting, we seem to put on another 5-10 people. So far, I think there's like 50 people who have signed up using the form. But I think the challenges I've had is, not having run a community before and trying to figure out how much I can delegate, how much in its infancy the group needs someone to just actually lead it, how long I should keep on leading it for, and when I should start stepping back and letting the group run itself. But I think one of the challenges we face is because it's a monthly call that is tended to take place on either a Friday lunchtime or afternoon. We seem to get a different cast list every call. So there's people who've have been there for call 1 and call 3, but they've missed 2 and 5. So it's kind of like keeping the conversation moving with different faces
and
in the room.
making sure they've got the context from like, oh, by the way, in these first couple of meetings we talked about this.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of it is documenting what was discussed in the previous meetings and making that really clear on the agenda invites. And we've got a Padlet where we're like saving the outcome of every meeting. So if people wanted to, they could track what's been decided and the actions that have come from each one. But it's just navigating things like that, I think, has been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Could use Copilot. I don't know if you've used that yet. I really enjoy that.
How would you use it in this instance then? What should I be doing?
Right. So I found Copilot just in general. Do you know when there is a big community of people and a forum? I've learned how to do I've learned how to do a product feature. The transcribe.
Okay.
So it records the meeting and it also transcribes conversation. And I thought when I first used it, I thought, that's not going to be accurate. Nothing's going to be as accurate as the human mind. And it's brilliant. It picks up on exactly like what people are talking about, and it just cuts out. Do you know, like if you're having a meeting and you're like, I've got to write all this down, and
well, I definitely need to do that.
It's really accurate.
I can't remember the name of the product now, but I was reading.
It does actions as well.
Oh, okay. This product I was reading about, it wasn't Copilot, but it was, you could, if you were in a meeting and say you weren't paying attention, you could say to it, what's happened in the past 5 minutes? And it would give you a lowdown of what's been said. And I just thought, wow, that's great, but also quite dangerous, isn't it?
It is dangerous, but I'm like, what is that product? Because we've all been there. Yeah. Brilliant. And have there been any benefits? Because you did mention, like, you know, this community's created connections that wouldn't have otherwise been there. I think what's really nice as well is, I'm assuming so it's a lot of people that work on the UK tech scene from all over. So I think it's really important to call out because we're Manchester based. It's not like Manchester-based thing. It's all remote. How's that been like, just bringing different communities together, like across? Because I guess it's like it's national. Because I feel like in Manchester, like we all kind of know each other. Like it's quite a small scene at the minute.
100%.
Yeah, how's it been like connecting with other people like across the nation? It's
been easier than I thought it would be, because it just, like, as I said, it's just kind of happened organically and people just opted in. But it's also been lovely, to be completely honest. And I think maybe that speaks to the fact that there's a certain kind of person that is interested in giving up an hour a month towards something like this. And the fact that they are driven to join it because of, a passion that they have. So they are coming to want to actually input and do stuff. It's not sometimes you can be on a call and it's very passive and no one wants to do anything. Like, that's not the case. So I find it, you know what it's like with, in product, you have a lot of meetings in a day. And how many of your meetings would you say energize you compared to drain you? Like, it depends, but I find this call really energizing. And I think that's partially because it's a great group of people. And I've learned so much. I've learned so much in a short space of time. And I feel that we're only just getting started, because now we've identified those unintended consequences that we're going to focus on for this year. We've got our next call this week, funnily enough. And one of the things that I think is going to be the outcome of that is we're going to try and assign working groups to each of the consequences. And then we're going to try and get guest speakers in who are actual experts on those things. So it's not just us having a stab at what it should be, but getting some of the the leading voices on AI or automation or data privacy or accessibility, sustainability, and then quizzing them basically on if we were going to think about ways to think about whatever their topic is with our product teams, what sort of things should we have in mind? So I just think if all that goes to plan, what I've just said, and I don't see why it won't, in 12 months' time, I think I'm going to be a lot smarter on the basis of just learning from other people. And that sounds great to me. And I'm hoping other people in the group feel the same.
Yeah. And it's true, like just generally as a product manager. So like there was never like a school that we went to learn about product or to learn our craft. And funnily enough, like me and Callum were talking about it on another episode earlier today. Like, there's not a specific skill set or way of doing product management. And the beauty is in identifying other people out there in the community. They have the same passions as you, but they've just got a different approach of tackling a problem. And we do it in our own jobs as well. Like, we'll go to like a colleague who works in products, and like, I'm sure you do the same thing. You go up to them and you're like, got this workshop coming up, solving this problem, can I just soundboard an idea? And they've had similar experiences, and it's all about opening up through the community. Like, I've never found other product managers that don't want to help other product people. Like, we're a very helpful community, which is what I love about the job.
Do you know what? I really find that, because I wasn't always in product. I was in marketing for quite a while, and towards the end of it, I just really didn't want to be in marketing anymore. And I kind of found out about product, and I was like, that sounds like something I could do. Yeah, I'd really like to do that. And I was thinking, how do I make a transition? And I ended up just going to loads of meetups and following people on LinkedIn and just being a pest. Like, I really want to know how to do your job and get into it. And considering I was just like basically like cold messaging people, I got so much advice given back to me, and people suggesting books or go to this place or think about this. And I've always like kept that in my mind of like, oh, this, people talk about like found my tribe. I kind of felt like I had at that point. And I think stuff like this, I'm hoping, is a chance to give back a little bit, because so much advice is freely given to me, but also just like going back to benefits, as well as like the hope of just us all upskilling ourselves on really important topics. What I've noticed, we've got a WhatsApp group to keep in contact in between calls, and just little things like there's some people in the group who are contractors. My contract's just come to an end. Does anyone know any contracts available? Or people have been posting in when they need advice or help on stuff. So it is that thing that you've mentioned about building a network across the country of other product folk who can offer support.
Yeah.
And like you and I are fortunate that we work for quite large organizations where I'm sure there's like a really good product community in Auto Trader, and there's the same at BBC, but that's not the case everywhere.
No,
So
like, what if you work at a startup and you're the only product manager?
Yeah.
And you're seeking that somebody who understands your job.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Sometimes you're just like, I just want to be understood. I'm facing this problem. Who can I speak to? Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully this community
less
can
loneliness.
help with that.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned, so you've been learning quite a lot from the community.
Yeah.
What have you been able to take into your own role? So at the BBC, have you taken it? Have you started to practice some things? Have you, like, what's been your experience of these learnings and taking them away?
Yeah, I think because, as I mentioned, I've only recently changed into a new role within BBC. I've moved into iPlayer. I think the place where I got to actually put some things into practice was more in my last role, where I was the product person for the design system within the BBC, or one of them at least. And within there, going back to that point before about, we decide what's prioritised, and there were some things coming in from, external requests. One of them being like these accessibility complaints that were coming in from people who were struggling with a change had been made on BBC News website, and if we didn't make change within the design system, that change would that those people were using screen readers would still struggle.
Yeah.
But there was also other competing work, like this needs to be done, and stakeholders. But I think being in the group and the conversations I'd had, and realising that I actually have the agency to make this choice here. So I'm going to weigh up what the impact is for the business and what the impact is for those individuals. And I made the decision at that point because we did some research on it, and we found that people using a screen reader, because of that specific change, they were just finding it so hard to navigate through the homepage. Yeah. And one of the BBC's big things is a BBC For You.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, well, is it a BBC For You if on the homepage of the national website that, majority of the population uses, you actually can't navigate it? Does that feel for you? So having that conversation and bringing that to light enabled us to make changes within the design system, which meant that every other team using the tech stack that the design system was part of felt the benefit of those changes. And it's just, I think it was like a mindset shift to thinking that way, that like, I want to prioritize the things that are actually going to have a tangible impact on things like inclusivity. But also, sustainability was a big one, because it got me really realizing that by encouraging people to adopt the common components within the design system, instead of building something new from scratch, you're preventing unnecessary things being built, being sustained, all the wasted energy that goes into that, and the effects that has on sustainability. So it wasn't so much that we had to change the way we were working in the design system, because that's the whole point of a design system, like adopt this stuff that's already here instead of building unnecessary stuff. But it got me thinking about, how can we change the language we're using? Yeah. Because quite often what you find if you're on a design system team is a team will come and say like, we really would love to use the design system, but our use case is actually just different to everyone else's.
Yeah.
And everyone says the same thing, and you're like, is everyone that special? Probably not.
No.
But it got me thinking that you could start having conversations where you'd say, okay, you can go and build this new thing that is 80-90% the same as this, but gives you that extra thing. Yeah. But here's the environmental cost for your team building that thing.
Yeah.
And
is it worth that to solve your problem? Is it really worth taking that like extra resource and capacity to do it?
Yeah, and another thing is take personalization. Lots of companies right now with AI and all the possibilities that are there, thinking we can go for like hyper personalization.
Yeah.
But is that always the thing that you should be? Should a page be entirely personalized, or should you choose what parts of the page should be personalized and the user maybe opts in, rather than just making those decisions at scale, thinking what is the most environmentally friendly way to do this? So we're still getting the impact that we want, but we're not just making blanket decisions that use a lot of energy. Yeah. So just a kind of like mindset change and trying to be more aware, I suppose.
Yeah, like, do I really need to do everything? It's one of those, like, business. You see it with AI at the minute. Like, we're trying to solve so many use cases as an industry, and it's like, what is that need to solve? Because if you try and do everything, firstly, sustainability, but also it's like, is that actually solving a problem and a need?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant stuff. What's planned for the future? Like, what have you got coming up to get people excited and signing up? And
well,
like, if you were to entice people to sign up today, like, how would you tell them, like, this is what we've got on?
Yeah, I think I just talk about like my own experience again. It's like meeting this group of people who are trying to do good things, trying to learn together, but also the aim is by the next 12 months, as well as learning a lot, we'll have also developed frameworks and tools that product people can have in their back pocket that they can take into the business and actually show how this thing that we're doing could cause harm, and that could have reputational damage for the company that we could avoid.
Yeah.
So I think it's a chance to meet like-minded people, get a bit smarter, get better at your job, and also do some good. So they all sound like good things to me. So yeah, maybe that'll appeal to some people, maybe not. But hopefully there's some people that listen to this and think, yeah, that sounds like something I'd like to do. I can also just say, I asked the group for benefits that they've had since being a part of Product for Good, and a couple of the responses said that kind of similar, finding a group that not only feels passionate about things that might not necessarily being talked about within organizations, but are also pragmatically trying to find ways to solve for those problems, to do wider good, is been beneficial and helpful for them. So that was really nice to hear.
Yeah. I love that word pragmatic as well, because it does give you that reassurance that, you don't need to solve something overnight, but if you just do things a little bit at a time through a community, things do feel easier. So if you've got concerns about the product that you work on, or you do have these feelings and opinions, you aren't alone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And maybe if you do have those concerns about your product, where can you go in your organization? Sometimes nowhere. So maybe come into the group, talking about it with the forum, but then being offered, a sounding board and hopefully some practical advice to take back in to have a better conversation would be beneficial.
Yeah, especially I guess like if you're, so you mentioned before, like if you're the only product or you one of a handful of like a small product team, it's sometimes, because I've worked at companies in the past where you are like the only product manager and it feels so lonely. And if you want to change something, it's like, how do I even have that conversation? Because often as well in product, like decisions already get made as well. How do you find your way into those decisions where you're not trying to completely overhaul the decision that's being made, but you're just trying to influence the impact that it's having? And I imagine like that is quite a, like I was thinking about that. I'm like, if I could do product for good, like how would I influence this huge company that I work at just to make small changes, and how do you tackle that? And I'm sure there's people that have got experience in this community that would be able to share it. So it's just, again, it's like a problem shared is a problem halved, isn't it?
But
so
I think what you've said there really speaks to a lot of what the purpose is.
Yeah.
It's not like we're going to result in like endemic change overnight.
Yeah.
It's like in your personal life, you make small changes, like I'm going to recycle properly, or I'm going to, turn the lights off.
Meat-free Monday.
Stuff like that. So it's, how can you be thinking that way in your job as well, and trying to make choices that better the world that you live in as opposed to harm it. And again, as I said, being optimistic, also do good rather than just not harm.
Yeah. Some excellent words to end on. Brilliant. Yeah, thank you for joining us. If people want to get involved, by the way, what is the best way to do that?
Probably the best way right now is to find me on LinkedIn and message me, and I'll send you the form.
In the show notes.
Brilliant.
So follow Michael on LinkedIn, give him a message, he'll sort it out from there, and remember to get involved. This sounds like a great community. I'll be at my first meeting on Friday as well.
Can't wait to have you there.
I can't wait for that. I've got a good overview of it now.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Don't forget to like, follow, rate, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next week for another edition of Roadmap.